Hi there, Steve Kaufman here. Again, to talk about languages and language learning. If you enjoy these videos, please subscribe. I appreciate all the questions and comments that I receive, and I try to answer them on the comment section at YouTube. But some of them are interesting, and I get requests, would you please do a video on this and that, and I appreciate that. I sometimes forget them, so you can remind me. But there was a question asking me what did I think of Interslavic, and so I Googled. And Interslavic was a project to develop some form of Slavic language which would be sort of a bridge between the different Slavic languages, so that I guess it made it easier for Slavic language speakers to communicate with each other, or that was the intention. There is also something called Interlingua, which was the same idea, to create some kind of a neutral sort of Romance language that would be, easy for speakers of different Romance languages to learn. What do I think of these projects? Essentially, I'm not a big fan. And, you could almost throw Esperanto into the mix as being sort of an artificially created language that's supposed to facilitate communication. I'm not a fan for myself. I always say people should learn the languages that interest them, whatever those languages may be. By the way, I had someone comment that I was a racist because I didn't learn native Mexican languages and I only learned European languages. Whereas in fact I have learned 4 Asian languages and I'm learning Arabic right now. I mean, we can learn whatever language we want, and I don't think we should criticize people or draw any conclusions based on what they learn. But insofar as myself, insofar as what interests me, I like learning languages that have a history, a country, a cuisine, a culture, a genuine native speakers. Now, I know the Esperantists say that there are native speakers of Esperanto, but not in any meaningful sense or meaningful quantity. You're unlikely to go to Esperanto land and sit beside, even in an airplane, sit beside someone who can speak Esperanto. So I'm not motivated. So if we get back to Interslavic, I guess it's possible to come up with some kind of a sort of neutral Slavic language which reduces the sort of idiosyncrasies of each Slavic language, which is easily written in Cyrillic and Latin, alphabet. But would I learn that language? I started out with Russian because it has the largest numbers of speakers. It has the best known literature, culture, and so forth. It's a huge country. It's tremendously attractive to learn Russian, to be introduced to that world. Would I take the interim step of learning Interslavic? I don't think so. I having learned now a number of Slavic languages to varying degrees of proficiency, I think in a way Slovak kind of does that, because Slovak seems to be the most easily understood Slavic language, kind of closer to Polish, closer to Ukrainian, even closer to some of the South Slavic languages, and equally distant from Russian as is Czech or Polish. So and there you have a country, you have a history, you can go and visit Bratislava and eat their food and stuff. So I'm not a fan of that. The same with the Romance languages. Interlingua, why wouldn't you just learn Spanish, which is the most widely spoken of the Romance languages, and then use that as a base to then focus on other Romance languages, which will then be easier because you have actually learned one of them. So there you have it, Interslavic, Interlingua, that's kind of my feeling. Same with Esperanto. I understand that Esperanto is easy to learn, and I understand that it would be a useful subject to have in school, young children who essentially will learn whatever you ask them to learn. And if they learn Esperanto and they have immediate success in being able to use the language, that may very well encourage them to learn other languages. So I see that as quite useful. But as an adult, I wouldn't, I need to get sort of really into the language, which is what I'm doing with Arabic. I am sure that it would be far easier for me to learn Esperanto. It's been about a month since I started into Arabic. My iPad is never far away. I try to get in an hour and a half of of linking and listening, and I still don't understand very well when I listen. But I do have the sense that I am improving. You can study the Arabic letters, and then when you see them again in the word, and you keep making the same mistakes, and so at times it's frustrating, but I had the sense this morning that I was actually getting a little bit better. Which reminds me of something else that I'll finish off on, and that is, people often sort of say, well, are you a linguist or are you a polyglot? Well, I really wasn't that familiar with the word polyglot 10 years ago, and I asked around in our office, and this is in Vancouver, and I would say that at least 10 years ago, most native speakers of English didn't know what the word polyglot meant. Most native speakers of English understood the word linguist to mean someone who speaks many languages or is good at languages. He's quite the linguist. He speaks many languages. Now I've become more familiar with the word polyglot, so I tend to use the word polyglot more. And linguist is used for people who study linguistics. Now, in the linguistics area, there are a number of terms that are used in applied linguistics, one of which is interlanguage. And interlanguage is sort of this concept that when we are learning a second language, we tend to use a language that is a mixture of our own and the language we're trying to learn. I've never understood why that would be a useful term, because, I'm nowhere in Arabic, and there will be a gradual continuum until I get good at Arabic. Those languages which are similar to our own, I think those are the languages where often we will maintain some phrases from our own language. For example, I hear Swedish people, and I have done a lot of business in Sweden, who are very fluent in English. And by the way, I was very impressed in listening to the Norwegian Prime Minister speaking so well in English. And a lot of the Scandinavians are very fluent in English. But there are certain phrases that remain there from their native language. For example, in English we say, there are, there is. There are lots of trees in Vancouver. And lots of Swedish people will say, it is many trees, because that's how it's said in Swedish. Or German people who say, I have lived in Canada since many years, instead of for many years. However well they speak, there are these remnants. It can also go the other way, where, and I should say that if the languages are more different, then there are phrases that you learn in that new language which are so different from your own that there's no chance, of confusing it. You start saying things automatically, like so this, do this, like, how about that? There is no equivalent in English, so you just naturally start to say these phrases in the language. Ja tak dumaju, I so think. We don't say I so think in English, but we say ja tak dumaju. I think so. So as we get better at the language, we start to start using those natural phrases of the language without thinking of our own. But of course, there will be some vestiges of, might be your own language, might be another language. So is interlanguage really something useful, or is it just a matter of we are gradually progressing from a very limited knowledge in a language to where we have more and more of the natural phrases of that language? But at times, and particularly for people who speak many languages, we could in fact be influenced by some other language. So there is always interference. So yeah, to that extent, interlanguage exists, but I'm not sure that it describes anything that has any particular application to anything. We just have to learn the language. Hopefully we're motivated to learn the language, and we just continue, as I am doing with Arabic, and we struggle, and we have, the victories seem few and far between, but lo and behold, even though we felt all the time that we weren't making much progress, after 6 months, a year or so, we find that we're able to handle the language, even with mistakes, whether these mistakes are influenced by our own language or another language, or just the fact that we can't remember how to say things properly. Anyway, bit of a ramble. I hope that answers the gentleman who asked about Interslavic, and bye for now.